And we are live. Hey everyone. Welcome to another broadcast, another SVT time. At this point, I don't even remember how many SVT time lives we've done, but we got a real special SVT time live for you today. I've got actually two very special guests here. Joining me today as my co-host is Haji. You guys in Ampeg land, I'm sure you all know the name Haji. We're going to bust Dom a little bit here because he's on vacation, or actually on his honeymoon in Bora Bora. So we're going to bust him for not wanting to call in from the islands on this. But also, our very, very special guest today is Hunter Burgan from the band AFI. And Hunter, thank you for joining us today. How you been?
Thanks for having me. I've been hanging in there, as I'm sure everyone has.
Yeah, I know it's kind of, I apologize. It's almost like a rhetorical question now. It's like, so how you been? What you been up to? But
now we're in October. It's like we've had that conversation.
Yeah, right. I know it. It's almost like, for the longest time I'd start an email with, I hope this finds you happy and healthy and safe. And I still do to some degree, but it's kind of like it's what are they calling it now? They're calling it. I heard it. It's like regarding being so acceptable of what COVID is now. I forget what they're calling it, like COVID lax or COVID's. I can't remember the name. Anyways, it's not relevant. So we got a lot of things to talk about here. As most people know, the sky's the limit. We talk about everything from bass gear to you as a bass player, musician, what you've been up to favorite chicken sandwich recipes. Yeah. But seriously, let's start with, so obviously with everything that's been going on in terms of, just not being able to perform. And I know AFI, you guys are a high energy live show, obviously, and you guys spend the better part of your time pretty much touring. What have you been doing to kind of make up for that time as far as the band goes?
We've been sitting around. We had planned a tour and had a bunch of things planned for this year that obviously were put on hold. And so, we finished a record early in the year before everything happened. And then we've just been sitting on it. Mm-hmm. And it's usually our goal is to have plan a tour around a record release.
Of course.
And so without the ability to tour, we're just sitting on a record, kind of waiting for putting together a plan. So it's been weird. I'm used to a certain amount of sitting around and waiting, but usually I know what's coming up in the future. Right. And so this has been a little different as far as the band goes. So, short answer, nothing. We haven't been doing anything.
Yeah. Obviously, again, being in a band context, of course, probably being apart from your bandmates is hard. It's hard on anybody, I would imagine. But do you guys get together at all on like Zoom meetings or Zoom calls or send sessions like, hey, I came up with this idea for a tune, so I'm going to send it to you?
Yeah, we've done some Zoom meetings, constant emails. That's been sort of our main method of communication over the years. And it's, I don't know. I guess it's we have spent so much time together over the past 20 plus years that it doesn't seem weird that it's been over a year since I've seen those guys. Right. It's a little weird, but also I think like over the past 6+ months, my perception of time has totally changed and shifted. And so on one hand, it feels like it's been 10 years since March, but also at the same time, it feels like it's still March. So I'm not even sure, like when somebody says like, it's been a year since this, I'm like, that's it, like, what's going on?
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like a time vacuum, you know?
Yeah.
Have you, I've seen a lot of people saying that this is kind of the forced break that they didn't know that they needed. Do you feel that maybe you needed to just have a little breathing time, or how do the other guys think about that?
I mean, I think we are always kind of facing criticism, some of it from ourselves, for taking too long between records, taking too long to do the things that we do. And on one hand, we are just generally trying to make the best record we can, write the best songs, make it sound the best. So the time that we take is put into the work. And for the people sitting at home waiting for us to go back out on tour, they don't know all the work that we're putting into it, so they're just waiting. So I don't know that we need any more time.
Right.
It's yeah, I think everybody, including us, we're all very eager to get back out on the road and to release music into the world. And so we don't need this break.
Yeah. How, on average, how many months are you guys usually out on the road for, though? I mean,
it varies. I think we used to, like back in the 90s, we would just tour relentlessly. We'd come home from a tour and there'd be like a week off, and then we'd go back out again. And then I think, over the past 10 years, we've tried to be a little more strategic about it. And so we're probably still out, like on a touring year, we're probably out like half the year.
okay.
So, but it's not all in a row. It's, we put breaks in there so that we lose our minds.
Yeah.
Now,
just so I just want to talk about a little bit about your history with the band too.
Mm-hmm.
So you joined the band in '97, correct?
Yeah.
Am I right in that?
That is correct.
Okay. But there were a couple of bassists before you. Is that right too?
Yeah. So I guess there was the very, very, very first bassist was not really in the band for much time, but technically was in the band.
Okay.
And then Jeff, the bass player who I replaced, was in the band for a couple albums.
Okay.
And then he quit, and I filled in for a period of time, just as like a temporary guy. And then at the end of my second tour, we did an album with me as a temporary guy and a couple tours, and then the guys asked me like, "Hey, will you just be the permanent guy?"
I thought you'd never ask.
Did you know the guys beforehand, or was there like an audition, or did you?
Yeah, we were kind of we played a lot of shows together. I was in another band called Force, and our singer was was a close friend and also the merch guy for AFI at the time. And so we would play shows together, and we even did, I guess once I was filling in, we did a tour together. So I was doing double duty. But yeah, it was kind of I think I was one of maybe a small number of possible candidates to fill in. And maybe I was the easiest one. So I don't know, it worked out for me.
Well, I mean, we all know, as bass players and just, guys that have been in bands, obviously if you're playing the gig, you can play the gig.
Yeah.
After that, it's like, can we hang with this dude for 6 months in a tour bus or a year in a tour bus? Is he a good guy to hang out with? It's all, we all know it's all about the hang too.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that is a lot of people ask,
Yeah.
like how do you get these gigs? It's like, well, it's people have to like you first and foremost.
Yeah, I mean that's I think that's super important. I mean, obviously, yeah, you need to be able to perform to the level that is required. But then it's I mean, I think a lot of what has helped me over the years with finding this kind of work. I mean, obviously, this is my band, so that's one thing. But
Sure.
I've played with other groups too, and it's I'm not I'm not a partier. I don't use drugs. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I'm vegan. Like those things. Some people will look for those things. Is what I'm saying. It's not everybody, but generally, I'm not going to be. I'm not going to add any issues to a touring situation. So
Yeah. I'm looking at some of the, like I said, we have a bunch of questions, and actually there are questions coming in too. So this one, some fan questions. Hunter, do you use down picking techniques for the more punk songs like Dumb Kids, or maybe in your earlier work?
Yeah, let's see. I have a weird thing with picking, since we're getting into picking. I have a weird pattern that I do.
Okay.
when I'm down picking, and it's like a pattern of down picks with an up pick in there. Occasionally, I'm trying to think of what it actually is like. It's almost like a paradiddle between like down picks and up picks. Like I think
Okay.
I on the. I think I'll pick on like the backbeat. So it'd be like down, down, up, down, 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 up, down, 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 up, down, 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 up.
Interesting. Okay.
But maybe not consistently. But I think anytime you hear something that seems like a down picking thing, it's that. I also really work to develop like the consistency between down and up, so that I could do all up picks and you wouldn't, or like I could be doing back and forth something and it would just sound pretty smooth.
Yeah.
So, but if it's going to be kind of a really driving thing, I'll do my special pattern.
Cool. We'll dub that the Hunter technique.
The Hunter technique. It is. I mean, I don't like, I don't. This just happened over time. It's not like I thought, I should do this like
Right.
weird thing. So it's just sort of the way that I came to it. I mean, like I have my friend Joe that plays bass in Rise Against. He's an up picker.
Okay.
And that blows my mind. Like
all up picks.
Yeah, all up picks, or if he's starting a back and forth, he'll start with the up. If there's like a crucial hit at the end of a song, he'll do it as an up stroke. Like it just
It's
to me, it's just like, oh god, it feels like sketchy. But,
yeah, I don't want to say counterintuitive, but it just like when they say downbeat, you think down pick, not up pick sort of thing, right?
Yeah, but it's like once again, it's like you start playing this instrument and you kind of figure out what feels comfortable and what feels right to you, and then you just maximize that. So
right.
And he fights.
Now, was that the tech? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Haji.
I just said his technique is to fight gravity.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
But like it works for him, and that's the thing. So
Yeah. Now, were you a bass player at first? Because I know you play a bunch of different instruments.
Yeah, right. No. Like many bass players, I wasn't a bass player at first. I played saxophone. I guess actually I played clarinet. Messed around the piano, then played saxophone, and then when I was in 8th grade, I had been, I've been playing. I was playing in like the jazz band, the school band, like the marching band, and I wanted to start like a rock band with my friends. Like that just seemed like the coolest thing. And I thought, you know, saxophone's only going to get me so far in that. Like, I need to play guitar. So like, you know, I got a guitar and I couldn't play it at all. I'm like just really struggling with it. And then, but I still started bands, like, you know, so like, you know, found some of my friends who were struggling a little harder than I was, and we kind of made a thing and kind of got some bands going. And then I got like where I was actually pretty good. But then I loved being in bands and starting bands so much that I, like any opportunity to join a band that needed a drummer, I'd be like, oh, I play drums.
Yeah.
And then, you know, before they got a chance to even, you know, find out if I did or not, I was already kind of figuring it out.
Yeah.
And so that sort of continued throughout high school. And then suddenly I found myself doing the same thing on bass. There was a band that I started with two friends, and we all played bass, drums, and guitar, and we would sort of rotate. You know, every time we get together to jam, we would sort of change and switch it around. And then eventually, like, I sort of fell into the bass role. Like, that seemed like the best combination. Sure. And then from that point on, I actually felt like, okay, now I'm like a bass player. I need to sort of consider what it is to be a bass player and actually like understand that role better. And then I guess I've still continued to play other instruments in other bands, but that's from that point on, I was like, okay, I think I see and understand something about the role of a bass player that most of these other guys don't get. Yeah. And so it's more important for me to do the bass thing because they'll never get that.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's true. You know, it's funny because you can always, and nothing against guitar players, but you can always tell when, you know, an accomplished guitar player picks up a bass. And sounds like, you know, and there's nothing against that. Everything sounds fine. But I remember when I was taking lessons years and years and years ago, I started taking bass lessons from a bass player. The Cat, that's all he played was bass and upright. And then we had kind of parted ways. And then I started taking lessons from another guy that was a guitar player that was teaching bass. And that was, you know, at an early age, that's when I realized, like, oh, there is a difference between a bass player that plays other instruments versus an instrumentalist that may play bass.
Yeah.
You know, just that certain mindset. I mean, let's face it, we're all crazy. We're bass players.
Yeah.
Were there players that influenced you that you kind of looked at and said, okay, this is a bass player?
I mean, yeah, but it's interesting because sort of at the point at which I sort of found my way to bass, the music that I was listening to and the music I was trying to play really played a role in that, because I wasn't, you know, it's not like when I picked up the bass, I was like, you know what, I'm going to sort of take all my favorite bass lines and things and kind of make a thing. It was like, I need to play this really fast, intense bass with a lot of chords. And, you know, it was like it was utilitarian. It was like specific to the band that I was playing in at the time. And so the first stuff, even though I had obviously been influenced by everything that I'd heard up to that point, the stuff that I was listening to the most at the time really went into my early playing. And so that would be like Jawbreaker and like Operation Ivy and like, let's see, like Crimp Shrine and Iconochrist and all this really like fast, intense stuff with a lot of melody to it and a lot of notes, chords, and all sorts, you know. And so it was only, and I really developed that for a while because I wasn't playing anything sort of outside that style. And then finally, as the music that I was playing evolved to a point where I could add in the influences that I had, you know, taken in from all the music that I loved, then it was really fun. Like once I was in AFI and once we were kind of pushing our style a little bit, then I could start to add some of that like I don't know, like the Bootsy Collins stuff and like the Jamerson stuff and like just little things. So by the time we had done a couple records, I had already finished, like what we were playing was still sort of like punk, but I was done playing punk on bass. I was ready to put in like, you know, in like my jazz influence and like other things. And so you can kind of hear that records, like the I don't know, the way that I'm already pushing back a little bit.
Yeah.
Still playing along and still playing fast stuff, but also trying to just add like whole notes in and melody and different things and like you know, a little more like syncopated stuff and just, you know, really, I don't know. It's interesting because they're still obviously trying to serve the songs and serve the style, but also trying to really push something new into it.
Yeah. You feel like you almost want to you want to grow as a bass player. You want to expand into new territories, if you will, in a certain way, right? You know, doing the same thing over and over and over. At some point, you want to expand that. You know, just in anything we do, we always want to get better and learn new things. I would imagine. You know?
Definitely.
Actually, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, or Athen brought up a very good point about your key role as a bass player for AFI. He's saying that it comes from the fact that there's only one guitarist, and as a result, you have pretty much a huge sonic space that you have to fill as well. So, you know, I would imagine that kind of plays into it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's like definitely. I mean, that's I guess you get that in any group with a single guitarist and kind of that's going to go. I think also just coming from you know, coming into a band that's early, all their early records, both the bass and guitar doing these like riffs together, all these, you know, quick chord movements, and you know, just and a lot of the rhythms in those early records before I was in the band, the rhythms are very similar from song to song, and so I think just having all that, like such a kind of unrelenting sort of homogeneous sound, it was nice to kind of be able to have some space to sort of do a thing, or just even if there was an opportunity to or let me rephrase that, sorry, even if it seemed like, hey, maybe this song also calls for the bass and guitar to be just doing the same thing, it was at that point I was like, you know what, no, I'm going to do my own thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to play the notes that you know, that I'm not hearing. I want to hear just something different. So, you know, it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Well, there was a famous quote. I don't know if it was actually Sting that said it, but you know, it was kind of interesting as a bass player. It's like the name of the chord isn't decided until I play the note below everything, you know. So it was just kind of interesting that.
I like that.
When you develop, you know, somebody might be playing a C major chord and you're playing an E and bass, you know, and now you, yeah. Anyways, I don't want to get into theory because I don't know anything about theory. But yeah, I mean, depending on what we play as bass players, really determines basically the sound of what the chord's going to sound like. Pretty interesting. Right. Now, let's talk about gear a little bit. So every picture, every time I've ever seen you play, it's always been a P bass. Is that
so?
Yeah.
Okay. So so all through the 90s, I played a jazz bass.
Okay.
And I'm trying to remember why I got a jazz bass in the first place. There was like some specific reason why I thought the jazz bass was like the one. And I don't remember now because this is like early 90s. Because it was different, you know, because you'd see P basses everywhere. And I think just it seemed like the pickups were different. Like, what is this bass? This kind of like offset thing? Like, So I did jazz basses all up until, like, exclusively on the records, touring, up until, I want to say Sing the Sorrow. Jerry Finn had a couple of P basses in the studio, or like we rented one, but then he had some other basses, and just suggested, like, why don't you just see how it sounds on some of these songs? And so I ended up playing the P bass on a couple of the more aggressive tracks, and I thought this actually helps it, like this tone helps it sort of punch through a little bit differently. And so I continued that combination of both basses on tour and then also on the following record, and then it sort of transitioned into more just a P bass. I'm like, you know what, it's P bass is helping. Like, I can take this on the road and I can kind of approximate the sound of everything I want to do a little more than the jazz, and then sort of it just eventually shifted. I mean, even still, when I go into the studio, I will bring like 10 basses with me, and you know, like 3 of them will be jazz basses, 3 will be P basses, some other weird wild cards.
Sure.
So on any of our records, you're not necessarily hearing just one or the other. And then I just play P basses live. It's just kind of a thing. So it just sort of, I don't know, it just sort of shifted over time. But it's interesting because I went, a couple years ago, I played with some old friends at a sort of a reunion show for our old band. And I brought a jazz bass just because that was what I played back in the day. And I thought I'd just check it out. It was so interesting to hear the tone in that live setting, and just like, it just, I guess I'm just so not used to hearing it, just the nuances, but having it make so much sense with that music.
Yeah.
But still being sort of foreign for what I'm used to hearing.
Right.
So,
but it worked in that context at that time because that's what you played with a particular band.
Yeah, I mean, and had I played P bass back then, it like playing a jazz bass would have sounded so bizarre now.
Right.
So, but yeah. So I'm all about both basses. When people are like, you have to pick one, like you got it, like, oh, I'm a jazz bass guy. What are you doing playing the P bass? Like, no, it's like they both sound good.
Right. I mean, that's, the old saying. It's like, nothing works better than a P bass or a jazz bass. I mean, there are great basses out there. Don't get me wrong, and I've got a bunch of them. I'm sure we all do. But there's just something about I want to say a good sounding P bass versus just a P bass, because there are some pretty bad sounding P basses. Oh, yeah. Do you have any vintage pieces, or are all is most of your gear?
I've got I went out and got a 62 P bass.
Okay.
And just to have, I mean, it was like I went out and got, because that's what James Jamerson played.
Yeah.
And then, but it's great. I mean, that usually ends up on at least a couple songs on every record. I don't take it out on tour. It's just too valuable.
It's too risky. I know.
And then I have a 66 jazz bass that also sounds really good too.
Okay.
Same thing. I'll use it in the studio, but it's never seen the road. It never will.
Yeah, no, exactly. And there's so many companies that make really good P basses and jazz basses that you don't feel as threatened taking them out on the road as you would a vintage piece.
Exactly.
What do you use? I know the answer to this, obviously, but if you wouldn't mind telling everybody, what do you use live for rigs?
For rigs, I just have 3 like full SVT setups, classic head and A10 cab.
Yep.
And I run them each individually. Okay. So I have a weird like splitter system in the back, so they're each run independently. And one of them is like the front of house sound. So it's it's like a little quieter. It's exactly what they want, and it's it's dialed in, and I'm not allowed to touch that.
Okay.
And then usually the one on the opposite side of that, of the 3, is the one that I can just mess with live. And so I'll during certain moments I'll get right up against it and like be like holding a note and I'll like, crank up the gain and really get that I guess it's feedback, but like, this intense sustain, and it's like buzzing and getting insane on that amp. But then the one that's going to front of house it's just like a nice sustained note.
Right.
So, and that's some venues that we play are completely inappropriate to have gigantic amps.
That's such a strong word.
And so I have to run them at 1 or like 2. and I do appreciate the irony of having 3 huge amps all set to 2.
But it's funny you say that, because there's a difference, and I know I'm gonna get upsided by my bandmates for saying this. There's a difference between being loud or sounding loud versus sounding big. And when I roll an A10 cab into a small venue or with some of my gigs, and my bandmates look and go, dude, what are you going to do with that? It's like, I'm not going to be loud. I'm just going to be big. And I guess that's kind of the really only way I can describe it. Like you're saying, you roll 3 810 cabs into a small venue. You don't necessarily have to be loud, but you're just going to be big sounding, Yeah. That's the only way I can really describe it. So just remember, next time you roll into a small venue and front of house goes, man, you don't need all those cabs in here. It's like, I'm going to be big sounding tonight. I'm not going to be loud. I'm just going to be big.
Exactly.
Do you use anything in your signal chain? Any pedals or anything?
I have, I have a pedal board that it's purely just for like super affected parts of songs.
Okay.
So, there's I'm trying to think, I want to say it's like all electric harmonic stuff, just by chance. There's one pedal that's like, it's like an EQ with like a fuzz thing, and I've rolled off like all the highs and all the lows, and it's for a moment in a song where it needs to sound like really sort of tinny and thin, and a little driven. I think there's there's a bass microsynth in there that is just for like a song where I need this sub octave and for it to just sound like massive and insane. And then in that moment I'm playing like very lightly with my fingers just to barely get like this note, just barely get the note, and it's just
okay.
But nothing that I'm running like through the whole set, or it's all just like the one part of one song needs that effect.
Yeah, I get you. Okay, all right. Now in your play-alongs, for those that haven't checked it out, you got to check out some of Hunter's play-alongs, because they're phenomenal. Like playing along with AFI tunes, but you're using predominantly like a little micro VR.
Yeah,
little head and the 210 cab. Are you recording off the cabinet, or are you running a DI out, or how are you doing that?
No.
Oh, did I freeze?
Oh, I think I cut out there for a second.
Oh, I think we're good here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
start over. Sorry.
No. That's cool. I know. Well, it's no, I was asking, like in your play-alongs with the micro VR rig, are you miking the cab there, or you also coming DI out of the head? Because they sound fantastic. That's
the most like Mickey Mouse thing that could exist. I had to, it was trial and error. I had to figure out how to make it work, and so that's the sound of the micro VR and my phone. Like it's just straight to the phone.
Okay.
I had to figure out how to get the song that I'm playing along with over to the phone and have it balance, but also not be so, I don't know, I obviously don't want the bass from the recording to overpower the bass that I'm playing. And so It's like I mean, if you could see behind the scenes, it just looks like there's a weird little speaker that's kind of sitting there with cords coming out of it. One of the cords is like halfway in there. It's coming out of my computer. It's crazy. Somehow I got it to work. Yeah. And as soon as I figured it out, I'm like, I can never touch this again until I'm doing videos, because as soon as I touch it, like the whole thing, I'll have to figure it all out again.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're recording that all on your phone?
That's just with my phone, yeah.
Wow. Like right off the microphone, right off the phone. You're not using like, I don't know, I got like one of these little iRigs that I can plug into my phone. That's certain right off the
that would be like the smart way to do it, and I'm just doing it just the way that I figured out.
No, but it sounds great. It sounds absolutely fantastic.
Well, thank you.
And Eric's even asking, Eric C here is saying, yes, do more play-alongs. So
okay, I will. I can figure out how to reproduce. Do more, I will.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I don't know, about 2 years ago, I think we're going on 2 years now, you had come out to Calabasas to the main office. We had asked you to participate in lending us your ears, because we were working on a new SVT.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I wasn't there at the time. My partner in crime, Dom, he's the Ampeg, he's basically the product manager, was there. And they wouldn't let me in the building at the time. In fact, they still won't let me in the building. We'll get into that later. But so you were kind enough to come out and spend some time with Dom and the engineering team, and demoing a bunch of different eras of SVTs. And eventually that became what is known today as the Heritage 50th. So I know, like I said, that was 2 years ago, but do you remember that experience coming to the studio?
That was cool. Yeah. It was cool to see each of the the different eras all set up and ready to like plug in and play and experience that. And also I just remember thinking, like, these all sound great, and yet they sound different. And that, they're like, each sort of specific to a thing, but sounds like the best version of that thing.
Yeah. It's
also, I wish that I had that set up, like when I go into the studio, to be able to just like plug into these different, like, 60s, 70s, like,
I think I might know a guy that can set that up for you.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
No, it was, yeah. Cause and first of all, thank you for your time on that. That was like, that's what we were going for. We wanted people that know what an SVT sounds like and what an SVT is supposed to sound like, and can appreciate how a 69 is going to sound differently from a mid 70s, is going to sound different from a CL.
Yeah.
And that's basically what came down to be the Heritage 50th, which, I don't know if I don't know if you've actually played to a 50th yet.
I haven't.
Okay. All right. Well, what the original plan was this is all pre-COVID, and of course, all this was, once we get the 50th done, we were going to invite you and all the other artists that donated their time to come in. I know you had come in, Emma Anzai, who we had on in the last SVT time. Yeah. She had come in, Rudy Sarzo, Tim LaFave, basically everybody that came out. We wanted to kind of have like almost like a cake cutting ceremony or cake cutting party where we were like, hey man, this is, like Oprah, everybody gets an SVT sort of thing,
Yeah.
But anyways, hopefully when this is all done, that's still the plan, is we want you guys to come out to Calabasas. We'll reminisce about that day when you all came in and demo. Hopefully they'll let me in the building at that point too. I don't know. We'll see. But so somebody actually, Steve Tudbury's asking, out of all those, do you remember which one was your favorite?
So I don't remember, like, I just remember thinking like I remember thinking they all sounded great. And there were ones that I think that I liked more than others. I really like getting some like real grit and drive out of some of those. But then I think also my brain is like, okay, well, how, like, what's the application of my life? What am I doing? You know?
Yeah.
And you know, it's for like the AFI specific live thing. I'm so used to having those, you know, the three classic heads all dialed on two.
Yeah.
And just having it be a really super clean, not like driven sound, just so that if I need to, I can dig in and like get that. But if it's a really like kind of a stark moment, it can still be very like almost like you know, almost like piano like. And so obviously if it's a real gritty tone, that's not going to work. So, but for like, I don't know, for the stuff that I love playing, for the stuff where I'm in the studio and you really get like just a thing, like, I don't know. So I want to say, God, I wish I remembered. I mean, it's all on tape somewhere, right?
Yeah, because we videotaped the whole thing as well.
Yeah. I'd say that, I want to say maybe that 70s one.
Okay.
But I don't remember. I don't know. I mean, I do remember that they all sounded great. So
it's kind of an unfair question. It's like asking you what's your favorite P bass sort of thing, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's also like, well, what's the song? What's the vibe? What's the thing?
Of course.
So, especially like, you know, in all the years that I play in a lot of different groups and on different records, and you know, it's the tone changes for everything, and it depends on the part, but then also like consistently, it's always been Ampeg. Like, it's always, you know, there's some, like, depending on what I bring to the studio, I have a I think it's a classic, although I have to check, but it's like custom white head that I always bring into the studio.
Yes. I remember seeing the picture of it too, because at the time I think it was was it Scott Patterson or Chris Johnson that did that? It was before my time as the artist relations guy.
Yeah, I think that was Doc, maybe.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, we're going back to St. Louis music days.
Yeah, this is St. Louis.
Yeah, it was Steve Dockraden then.
Yeah.
Yep. So Athens' comment is that the custom white head was from December Underground.
Yeah. So that was for that record we did white everything, all gear and you know, everything white. So that was back in like 2006. And so I still have a couple of those heads, and I will bring one of those into the studio every time I go.
Okay.
And that's usually what I use. Sometimes, like, there's I've been using like I guess it's like a B15 that they have at this one studio that I use a lot, and that's been another, like, just they set it up and it just sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And so it's like whatever like the song is sort of requires. There's usually some Ampeg in the mix. Either I brought it or it's already there that like can be dialed in perfectly to get exactly what we need out of it. So
yeah, and I know different studios are, like you say, like certain studios will have that one piece of gear or that Ampeg B15 or SVT that they've just that's the amp that is dialed into that room, and the engineer knows how to dial it in, and you don't mess with it, and it works for that room. But sometimes it'll work for the song, or sometimes it may not work for the song. But that you brought up a really good point that, obviously the instrument and the amp and the sound that you're using has to be dictated by what's useful in the context of the tune that you're doing at that point. In fact, somebody question here was, from the Tenacious C. He asks, "Hey Hunter, you've been with Ampeg for as long as I can remember, probably always. How much of the album's amp tone is replicated when performing live? Do you have separate configurations that you use strictly for live that doesn't change?" And I know you had answered pretty much a lot of that, but just getting into a specific question on how much of the amp's tone is replicated when performing live.
Yeah, I mean, like I described my live setup, and that, if it's, I need to have a pretty consistent tone across each song, and this obviously, like the songs we play in our set list cover a lot of different albums and sort of different sounds, but it needs to work in the context of that live band. So
okay,
that's with the exception of the effects pedals that I put in for songs, for the most part, it's a pretty consistent sound, and the difference in terms of tone is mostly just coming from my hands.
Yeah.
But then in the studio, when it's everything's under a microscope and you have the ability to have a lot of different tones and little subtle things, it's usually I will do a combination of there'll always be some Ampeg in the mix.
Sure.
And then sometimes I'll have like a DI, Ampeg, and then always like a wild card that's often a guitar amp. Maybe through like a tiny speaker cabinet or something that just if we need to add it into the mix it in a little bit, it gives a little edge or something. Or sometimes that'll be, if I'm using chorus, like a chorus pedal, it'll be only on that channel.
Okay.
And it'll be, so it's, I don't know, in the past that has been like, not to, I mean, am I allowed to throw other brand names into this chat?
Of course. Yeah, guys want to know what you're using.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sometimes it'll be like an old Marshall, or like I have this old, it's like my original bass amp that I had like back when, in the very beginning was like a PV.
Okay.
It's like a PV combo with like, I put casters on the bottom and I would just wheel it around to gigs and, through the mud and whatever. And it's kind of waterlogged. Like it sat in like someone's basement and like soaked up water for a long time, but it still sounds like, I mean, it sounds horrible on its own, but it sounds like kind of like the beginning of my bass career. And so sometimes I'll add in a little bit of that because it has such a specific kind of like nasty sound to it. So I'll blend a little bit of that in there.
Okay.
And so I'm not replicating that live. I mean, like live, it's just, I want everything to sound really good. So
you don't bring that PV out live for that one specific.
Yeah.
I think we, actually, Steve, Doc had just commented. He's Hunter, great to see you. So good to see you on here, Doc.
Yeah, good to see you.
Too funny, man. Eric C is asking, do you have a favorite song to play live?
I do. There's a song off of the AFI record, Crash Love, called End Transmission.
Okay.
That for some reason just like checks all the boxes of like what I like. There's it has sort of a kind of a sparse rhythmic thing to the verse that has a syncopation to it. And then during the second verse, doing that same thing, I sing a harmony, and the timing of the two is a little off, and so it's like a challenge, and I love it every time I nail it. I'm just like, I love this. And then the the chorus has a bit of a swing to it, so it's kind of has a kind of a nice, and I'm also singing on that, and so it has a nice feel, like it's kind of a swing while I'm singing. I don't know, there's something about it, I just love it.
Okay.
And then during the middle eight, I do the thing where I sort of sneak my pick behind my finger, and then just play this real soft, like whole notes. And I don't know, just something. And then I don't know, something also about the dynamics of it. It has like, you know, kind of like softer parts and like louder parts, and just something about the specific elements of it. Just like every time, it's just like, oh, I love playing that song.
That's cool. That's cool. It kind of, it's you almost come out of it with a feeling of accomplishment.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. That's cool. Okay, so here's one. So with Halloween, this obviously Halloween is coming up in the next couple of days. We got to talk about the All Hallows EP.
Okay.
So let's talk about your cover of Halloween by the Misfits.
Okay. I can't remember.
Talk about the whole album or the whole EP, really.
I mean, the whole EP was we came up with the idea for it. It was we had just finished or just released the Black Sails in the Sunset album.
Okay.
And so this is like, I don't know, a few months after that, we had this idea to do an EP that was specific to the Halloween season, and couldn't get the label to be excited about it. Like couldn't get them to care about it. They were kind of like, well, maybe we'll do like a real limited thing, like, you know, just on CD. And like, no, we want this to be like a cool vinyl release. We want it to be available forever. Like this is a moment. So finally got them on board with it, and of course it did really well. And you know, yeah, it was pretty quick. Like we wrote the songs, rehearsed them pretty quickly, and just threw them on there really quickly. And which is great. I think it really kind of captured that sort of, I don't know, that sort of like spontaneity, that kind of energy. Even the song "Total Immortal" on there was even like, I feel like that was written like in the last week before we went into the studio.
Oh wow!
So, and I think this was back to all the bass players watching this. This marked the first point in time where I did something totally different with regards to the recording setup. All the albums that I'd done up to that point, I had been really disappointed with how the bass sounded in the mix, or just the ability to or the flexibility that we had in terms of mixing the bass in. It would always be, I would not be able to hear it enough. And I would say, can we turn the bass up? And then everyone else in the room who aren't bass players, they would all be like, the bass is way too loud. And so, and often what I wanted wasn't necessarily like the top end. I wanted the body, and I wanted to feel the bass.
Sure.
And at the time, we just didn't have the ability to like really do that in the way that I wanted to hear it. So, and I got to a point where I was like frustrated with this, to the point where I was like, you know what, I don't even care. I'm going to do this extreme thing, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, whatever. You could just take me out of the mix altogether. So I had, so I set up at the time, this seemed really extreme. In retrospect, it's not that extreme. So I set up the, Ampeg, like, 810 SVT, and I rolled off all the highs. And so just like maxing out the body.
Yeah.
And split it, which I hadn't done at that point, split it to a Sans amp pedal.
Okay. Yep.
And rolled off all the lows on that, and just took all the highs and all the the picking and everything is from that. So it was just like a very extreme split that I did, and I was like, I don't even care how it sounds. Just put it on, put it on there, and then of course, like, sounded great, and and everybody was totally cool with it being a little more up in the mix, which I hadn't, which is like, oh, like finally. So yeah, and then I kind of evolved that idea of like having multiple different channels.
Yeah.
Which is like, now is, and has been. Before that, it was like a pretty standard practice in most studios and most situations to have the bass going like a direct and an amp, or
right,
two different amps or whatever. But at the time, like, I hadn't done anything like that. So now, of course, I'm sending my signal to 15 different places and then trying to figure out, like, which ones I like and which blend it's. Yeah, so that was the first time that I had actually done something like that.
Okay. Now, do you find you find you have more freedom now in the studio to experiment with sounds, or is it still the bass is still too loud? I've
made it even worse for myself by I record my own bass now at my home studio for the stuff we do, and so I take as long as I want, and I use as many amps as I want, and I will reamp things.
Oh God!
Constantly, and I'll get it to where I think it sounds good, and I'll have like the fully like performed part all recorded, and then I will, the next day listen to it and be like, no, I need to reamp that, like, and I'll just constantly be like recording new amps that I have sitting around, and or I'll do something like, you know what, that sounds good out of the like, what was it? I think I tried to use the VR like little head with like a weird tiny speaker cabinet that I had, just to try to get an extra thing. I'm like, you know what, that's not right. I got to use like the white SVT head, and like just constantly mixing, or because I'm also engineering this, I'm like, you know what, it sounds great, but I need to use a different mic on that cab. And so that's another problem. It's like, well, okay, I'll have like two mics on one cab, like try to find which one sounds better. It's just, there's so many variables, and I'm like trying to use them all.
Yeah. The curse of having a home studio is what it comes down to.
Exactly. I'm like, well, okay, wait, which preamp is going to sound better with it? Yeah. With that mic? Like, should I use and I'm like, also at the same time, I'm like texting my friend who's like a producer and engineer, and be like, well, okay, so like Desert Island mic to put on a bass cab. What are you talking about? And he would give me a list and be like, oh, okay. Well,
Desert Island.
So yeah. What's that?
That's another rabbit hole, just getting the microphones. Oh God.
Yeah. So I feel like I did that to death, and I have like, I'm taking like meticulous notes of each thing that I'm doing, where I'm sending all the signals and like sending it, to this preamp and this EQ and doing all this stuff. And like, okay, if I can get it to where it sounds good, let me just try to get a couple songs done before I change anything. So yeah, and that's, and then I send those off, and then I'm sure like, then, my guitarist is like also tweaking them, and then send those off, and the mixer is tweaking. So it's like, who even knows what's happening by the end of everything? Right.
I know. Versus the old days of going in the studio, it's like, okay, guys, we got 3 hours to get these tunes in.
Exactly.
We'll just hammer through them. I know. It's the, as they say, the double-edged blade.
Yes.
There's quite a few guys or gals and players here that are crediting All Hallows as like their first introduction, and that's like Killer Tone. yeah, there's quite a few people that are commenting in here, like Eric C and AJ. They're all like, man, that was our introduction to AFI. So
That's cool.
good on you guys for like not paying attention, not caring what the record company said. Hey, we're going to put this out one way or another, because obviously it introduced AFI to a lot of people. That's cool.
That's awesome.
Now, of course, with Halloween being right around the corner, do you guys see like a bump in record sales on? I know I still say record sales, of course, because I'm an old man, but
I mean, it's to the credit of the label, which is now owned by other labels. Like we still have that release available on vinyl. So I think they've re-released it over the years. And I think originally it was a 7-inch. I think they also did a 10-inch version of it, and then there's always some version of it in print. I don't know if there's a bump. I don't get a breakdown of like specifically what's what. But I know that I, on social media, I get tagged in all sorts of posts about that record every year, and that's always really cool.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I think we've got time for a couple more questions here. We're going to wrap it up, but Haji, do you have anything that's?
Well, as you say, since we are just about into Halloween, we have a question from Art and Arcia. What's your top 5 horror movies?
Oh, good question.
Is the season?
Ooh, that is a good question. I've spent this month watching the least scary Halloween, I hesitate to call them horror films because they're not really like the least scary horror films possible, because my girlfriend is very scared by anything even remotely scary. So it's been interesting because I'm actually like watching movies that like I haven't seen since I was a kid, and maybe like weren't even scary then. But if we were to get back to actual scary films, I don't. This is a good one. I wish I had prepared an answer for this one.
Yeah.
I love the classics. I mean, like, there's. When I say classics, I guess that's subjective.
You're going to date yourself right now.
I think growing up in the 80s, to me, like Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th, those are like just these huge classic films. Now when I watch Nightmare on Elm Street, I'm just like criticizing the editing and like the effects. It's so cheesy, but like when I was a kid, that just scared me,
Right.
like, so it's, there's, I try to think of like, I would, as a child going to see these movies, it was like right on the edge of fright. Like they would give me nightmares, and I kind of hated it at the time, but also, like looked for that. And then as I got older, it would be harder and harder to find a film that would make me feel that same sort of thing. Like the film that once you got home from the theater, you were kind of like looking around. Like, So there's, I think I want to say that the only film that kind of tapped into that in recent memory was the movie It Follows.
Oh.
Which
So
I think is just great. I will never show my girlfriend that movie because she will hate me forever.
Absolutely.
But I do love a good like suspenseful horror film, as opposed to like just blood and guts and gore, and the ones that actually like take the time to build up like why we're afraid of this monster or these zombies or whatever, and really kind of make you worry that they might be around every corner.
Right. Yeah. No, there's so many great horror movies. I'm same thing. It's, you know, I classify horror movies as like, all right, is it a slasher film or is it a like ghost or demonic type thing?
Yeah.
I kind of lean more towards like almost like you're saying, like the suspenseful ghosts, you know, sort of. I'm not big into slasher blood and guts type movies. My wife is kind of the same way, you know. But there's so many great movies, and I mean, they just keep on getting better and better too. You know, it's a good movie when you're sitting in your living room and you're constantly like looking over your chair, just making sure there's nobody behind me, sort of thing.
I'm coming to get you, Dino.
Yeah, I live a pretty secluded life. I don't think anybody's coming to get me anyways. Okay, so we're gonna close this out. I got two questions for you.
Okay.
It's kind of like a quick round table.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah, lightning round. I'm sorry for not giving you a heads up on this, but that's kind of the whole idea. Is one is what's your favorite memory on stage?
Favorite memory on stage. Okay, so oh god, I would say there's one show that stands out in my mind, and it was we played in Warsaw, like 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago, and it was like the crowd was just so over the top feeling it that night, and we were feeling it, and it was feeling great, and we kind of just threw everything into the set list, and we were just having fun. And then we left the stage, and we did our kind of like that encore, you know, like okay, let's go back out there. So we went out and did our whole encore, and we just gave it all. We left it all on the stage, and then we left, and we went back, like, you know, one of the guys went back to the bus. We were like, clothes are off. We're like getting ready to shower and stuff. And then we hear this, like, what is that? And, you know, somebody comes into the room like, hey, can you guys come out and do any more? Like, do you have any more? They're not leaving. Like, wow. Like what? Like, no, we're done. And it was like, okay, we'll tell them we're done. We'll tell them you're done. And still like, okay, I guess we got to go back out there. So we kind of put ourselves back together and go back out there. And it was just like, they were just screaming for more. And so once again, we figured out something to play, you know, and like, okay, this is it. We're done. And we left and showered up, you know, had some snacks, maybe ate some cereal. An hour has now passed. And I'm like leaving the dressing room and heading to the bus, and it's like the entire audience is now waiting by the bus just to like meet us and just to like say goodbye to us. It was just like, it felt so like welcomed and like, wow. And I mean, and that's not to say that like every show doesn't have like a great feeling where we really feel appreciated and like, but this was just like more than over the top, more than I've ever experienced. I'm just like, just felt chills, like, wow, this is amazing. So that's for some reason that stands out in my mind and has kind of continued to sort of sit there. So I know that's not a lightning response to that.
No, that's cool.
Right.
That's cool. And obviously we know, you know what my next question was going to be, but I'm not even going to ask it because I want to end on a positive note. I should have asked you the first question first. And
wait, hold on. Let's do it anyway.
All right, so let me change the question a little bit. What's your scariest moment on stage?
Scariest moment. Well, let's see. I've broken some bones on stage before. I've broken my ribs twice. I burned my arm from here to here, like this whole section on like a stage light that had been on all day for other bands, and then it was off for us, and I fell onto it. One show in Canada, I was playing and looked down and saw a pool of blood, at my feet and thought like, oh, somebody must have cut themselves. And then I looked down and I saw that it was spraying out of my leg.
What did I say about slasher films?
I know. Sorry. I should have left that more suspenseful. And we never found out where the blood came from. So there was also a moment on stage where I used to dislocate this shoulder for decades. Dislocate the shoulder like really like in this really weird uncomfortable position, and I wouldn't be able to get it back in. But because I'm usually holding the neck, it's fine. It's like it never gets into the position where it would dislocate.
Yeah.
And one year on Warped Tour, it was like we had just been asked to play the main stage, in the middle of the run. We were so excited. It was like an opportunity for us to like sort of prove ourselves in front of that audience. And 2 songs into the set, I'm playing and somehow it pops out, and it for just a moment, it's out of the socket. And I'm like thinking like, oh shit, I'm not going to even be able to finish the set. This is like ruined our opportunity. And then it popped right back in. And so it was really sore, but like I was like, oh, like okay, good. That's like
Wow.
So those are probably the scariest moments, the spookiest moments.
Okay. Well, like I said, I should have asked that first, so we could have ended on the high note. Now, have you been back to Warsaw since?
We have not. No.
Interesting. Okay.
So I mean, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that when we do get back, back on tour, and we eventually make our way to Warsaw, that it'll still be as good.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Hunter, I can't thank you enough for joining us today.
Yeah.
This has been awesome. Haji, thanks for jumping in here last minute. I know I kind of sprung this on you like, hey, you want to co-host with me this afternoon?
Always happy to be here, Dino.
Yeah, no, and like
your shining face.
Most of you guys know Haji behind the scenes too. When it's Dom and Haji's usually fielding a lot of the tech questions as well too. So thank you for jumping in. Thank you everybody for chiming in with your awesome questions, your great questions. Everybody hanging in there and watching this. What can I say? Thank you so much. Hopefully, I say this all the time. Hopefully we can hit the road sometime soon and get back out and start entertaining people again and doing what we love to do. And until then, please,
doing these in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Just be safe, be healthy, and hopefully we'll see you guys out on the road soon. So thanks so much, Hunter. Cool. All right, guys. We'll see ya.